The horror psycho thriller revolves around an FBI agent who becomes a target of a satanic worshiper's dirty ritual. She survives and connects the pieces of the puzzle to solve the case and stop this vicious cycle. In a residential area covered in ice with no one in sight, a little girl watches out of her window as a car stops right in front of their house. Before she can find out more, her mother calls her inside. Later, when she returns, the car is gone, but an ugly man appears out of nowhere and wishes her a happy birthday, which is fast approaching. The scene shifts to the FBI chief briefing a team about the latest case, where they need to go door to door to search for a suspect. The suspect is a Caucasian male, and 2 FBI agents will cover different parts of the city. The lead character, FBI agent Lee, accompanies a man who plans to follow instructions and go door to door to ask about the suspect. Lee keeps looking toward a house with a terrified gaze and asks her companion to call headquarters for reinforcement, as she is certain that the suspect is in the house on this street. Her colleague laughs at her wild guess and refuses to call in the department. He decides to check the house himself and knocks on the door. Lee follows discreetly from a safe distance, but before she can reach the door, the man inside the house shoots her colleague dead. Terrified, Lee continues forward. The house is vacant, and upstairs a man, the murderer, is sitting on the bed. Surprisingly, he knows Lee. On her return, FBI agent Lee Harker undergoes a test from the department that only a psychic could pass. She answers most of the questions accurately, and her FBI chief, Carter, appreciates her. They are in a car parked outside a house where a father has brutally murdered his entire family and allegedly committed suicide. The bodies are left with a letter containing strange alphabets. At the end, the name Longlegs is mentioned. Carter shares that in the past 30 years, 10 families have been murdered in this way. Later, Carter takes Lee to his office and asks how she knew that their suspect was in the exact house. She humbly tells him that it's her intuition and that she sometimes makes accurate guesses. After handing over the case file for the 4 murders they discussed earlier, Carter notes that all the cases have one thing in common. The daughter of each family had a birthday on the 14th of any month. Carter assigns her the case and leaves. The police department receives a call from the father of a deceased family before he kills everyone in his family. He expresses fear of his daughter, who he believes is not truly his daughter, and says it is time to kill her. Lee tries to read the symbols but doesn't realize how much time has passed and falls asleep on the office floor. Carter wakes her up before leaving the office and offers to go for a drink. She initially doesn't want to, but accepts the offer anyway. She shares what she has studied about the case so far. Although the father killed his family and was later found dead, he was coerced into doing this by Longlegs. She suspects that Longlegs was not present in the house at the time but has an accomplice who does his work. Lee always speaks with an expressionless face while discussing this. Carter disagrees with her assessment, but since he is drunk, Lee offers to drive him home. Upon arriving in front of his house, Carter insists that she come in and meet his wife and daughter. Lee watches the daughter, Ruby, with apprehension, sensing something unusual. Ruby invites Lee to her room. Lee senses that Ruby might be the next target of Longlegs. As it is getting late, Anna comes to remind them, and while she is about to leave, Ruby invites Lee to her birthday party in a few days. Lee agrees and drives back home. At her lonely home, she calls her mother after some time. Her mother wants Lee to visit her on her birthday in a few days, but Lee does not promise anything. During the call, Lee hears a noise as if someone is around her house. Instead of going outside, she looks out the window and sees someone sitting in the front yard. Grabbing her gun, Lee confronts the trespasser but discovers that the person is no longer there and has entered her house. She immediately follows but finds that the intruder has left a letter addressed to her. The letter is a birthday card with some unrecognizable words written on it. Lee decodes the letter and finds that Longlegs has ordered her to tell the police how she knows so much about him, or he will brutally murder her mother. Suddenly, Lee receives a call from the department about a fresh crime in town and immediately heads to the scene. It is a family where the father has murdered everyone. The family was killed a month ago, but no one noticed because they were planning to leave for vacation on the same dates as the murders. Longlegs is the murderer again, and the family's daughter's birthday was on the 14th, which is common in all of Longlegs' victims. Lee finds a letter left by Longlegs in the house and decodes it. This surprises Carter, but instead of telling the truth, she lies and says that she researched the signs extensively to decode them. The worms crawling on the corpses are noted. Lee calls her mother again, telling her that she is happy with her new case, as it is what she has always wanted to do. She assures her mother that she will visit her on her birthday. Lee writes down all the data about the murdered family, and the sequence of numbers forms a shape found in a satanic book. The next day, she tells Carter about her research and insists that Longlegs is executing his plans according to an algorithm. This creates a specific shape, and according to this, one of the victims marked in the center of the shape has survived. She confirms from the newspaper that a child named Carrie Ann was at school when her father killed her mother and priest. One slot is missing in the algorithm, and Lee guesses that Longlegs will kill someone on the 14th of this week. They start by going to Carrie Ann's house, which has been empty for years. They discreetly enter and search the house. Lee calls Carter to follow her to the room upstairs. He follows and discovers a cross sign fixed to the floor. He removes a wooden piece and finds a smiley face on top of a box, which matches the shape Lee discovered earlier as part of the algorithm. The box, hidden inside, contains a doll. The doctor examines the doll and appreciates it as a work of a genius artist. Instead of a brain, it has a metallic ball, and the doctor claims he heard someone calling out the name of his ex. However, he ignored it. Carter decides to visit Carrie Ann. Meanwhile, the horrifying-looking Longlegs visits a hardware store where a girl shows her dislike for him. He screams in his car in response to the hatred. Lee and Carter meet with the mental hospital doctor, who informs them that Carrie Ann had been sitting silently in a chair for 20 years. However, someone visited her yesterday, and she is now behaving like a perfectly normal girl. Lee realizes that this is the same date they discovered her statue. When she asks Carrie Ann to recall something from her childhood, Carrie Ann rudely asks Lee if she remembers anything about being a doll. In a flashback, Carrie Ann's mother had already sensed that the gift of Carrie's statue had some demonic property. She tried to destroy it several times. Her father grew increasingly angry and, after murdering a priest, killed her mother as well. Carrie Ann also behaves like a slave to Longlegs and tells Lee that she would do anything he asks. This conversation gives Lee chills, and she finally discusses with Carter that Longlegs is a satanic worshiper who uses magic and voodoo dolls. At first, Carter does not believe her, but he becomes curious about how Lee knows so much about Longlegs. He reads Lee's file, where he finds that Lee's mother reported a complaint on the 13th, the day before Lee's 9th birthday, about someone walking around their house. This suggests that Longlegs visited her house as well, so he wants to meet her mother. First, he asks Lee to go home and find anything that might be useful for their investigation. Lee visits her house, which is cluttered. Her mother appears to be very strange and advises Lee to pray every day to keep Satan away. Lee admits that she never prays. As she goes downstairs to prepare food for her mother, she notices insects crawling out from behind a closed door, but she cannot open it despite trying. In a flashback, Lee's mother makes a call to the police when Lee was 9 years old to report an intruder and holds her gun tightly. Lee asks her mother why she called the police on the 13th of her 9th birthday, but her mother denies that there was ever a stranger or that she ever called anyone. Afterwards, Lee goes to her room and checks a box containing a collection of pictures. Among the pictures, she is shocked to find a photo of Longlegs and immediately returns to show it to Carter. She suddenly remembers that on that day, a stranger visited their house, and her mother asked him to stay away. However, the stranger sang a song in his ugly voice, saying that he would keep coming again and again. Carter is surprised that Lee has no memory of this man. Meanwhile, in his workshop, Longlegs is making a new doll. As a result of an extensive search operation, they arrest Longlegs standing on the roadside. In his first statement, Longlegs only wishes to meet Lee and continues singing a birthday song for the next 24 minutes. Agent Browning surprisingly informs them that Longlegs' luggage was loaded with satanic books and handwritten mysterious letters. It is confirmed that he was the one leaving notes with all the bodies. Unfortunately, according to the country's law, anyone can perform satanic rituals and is free to worship Satan, so they cannot stop him on that basis. At this point, Lee is sure that someone is helping Longlegs execute his plans, but Carter strictly denies the possibility that anyone can influence another person to commit a crime through witchcraft. Besides, there is no evidence of any accomplice at any crime scene. Lee insists that even though they have arrested Longlegs, this is not over yet. She goes to meet Longlegs, recalling their first meeting. Lee is terrified to see him. Longlegs says he sends gifts to little girls on their birthdays. If anyone destroys the gift, they will be destroyed as well, and whoever keeps the gift surrenders to Satan and does his dirty work for him. When Lee asks him about his accomplice, he tells her to ask her mother and suddenly starts banging his head against the table. He ultimately dies from the impact of banging his head so hard against the table. This enrages Carter, and he shouts at Lee for questioning their suspect. It is now confirmed that Longlegs had no accomplice. Agent Browning drives Lee home, thinking it is not safe for her to drive alone after this unfortunate event. She drops Lee at her mother's home and waits outside while Lee searches for her mother, who is nowhere to be found. Her mother silently approaches Agent Browning and shoots her dead in the car. Afterwards, her mother holds the gun at the 9-year-old Lee's statue. She doesn't believe Longlegs is dead. Instead, she thinks he is free. As she shoots the statue, Lee collapses, becoming unconscious. It is only then that Lee remembers what happened the day Longlegs visited their house. Her mother had told her the story that a doll maker creates a doll of a little girl and uses magic on it. Due to the magic, the little girl forgets what she was meant to forget and only sees what the doll maker wants her to see. However, her mother wanted the little girl to live. Lee remembers that on the day Longlegs entered their house, he tied her mother up to prevent her from stopping him. Her mother agreed to a deal if Longlegs would spare Lee's life. Afterwards, Lee's mother became Longlegs' accomplice. She only had to deliver the doll made by Longlegs to the houses he wanted. She would claim it was from the church, and as soon as the family received the gift, the father of the family would murder the mother and the entire family. Lee's mother had to watch everything until the end. On the other hand, now that Lee's statue has shattered, she not only remembers everything but also feels she can walk and move freely. She goes to the basement of the house, which had been used as Longlegs' workshop for years. It feels like she hasn't walked for years, and Lee barely makes it upstairs to receive a call. It's Longlegs, telling her that she is late for Ruby's birthday. She immediately gets in the car and rushes to Carter's house, screaming in helplessness. Carter opens the door, but he looks different, as if he is struggling to control his anger. Lee is definitely late. Her mother is already inside, and Ruby's doll has been delivered as a gift, and the magic has begun. Ruby hugs the doll as her most treasured possession, and as soon as Ruby's mother mentions that they should cut the cake, Carter feels an overwhelming urge to get the knife immediately. He can barely control his anger. Carter and his wife head to the kitchen, and Lee's mother tells her that things will happen the way they always do. From the kitchen, Lee hears Carter murder his wife. As he emerges from the kitchen to kill Ruby, Lee kills him. The work is not yet complete, and Lee's mother takes out her knife to kill Ruby, but Lee kills her instead. She quickly separates Ruby from her statue and is about to shatter the statue when suddenly, Longlegs' voice echoes in her mind saying, "Happy birthday" to her. She pauses to think for a moment and decides against destroying the statue. She leaves the house with Ruby.